Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Today's session really has two main functions. One is to share some really pragmatic advice about how to run campaigns in imperfect situations, um, which we feel tends to be the norm, the more common occurrence. There are lots of training pieces of training that you can get out there that talk about really the kind of the perfect situation where you've got time, budget, connections. Um, but from our experience, that's not the norm. And so today's about that. But it's also to announce and celebrate the launch of Turn the Page, which is a new entrant to the public sector communications space, headed up by someone you probably all know, James Morton, who's a good friend of ours. Um, and he'll be going a little bit more into that later. But we're very happy at CAN to promote and recommend James and his new venture. He's highly experienced. The level of work and dedication he puts into everything that we've worked on with him has been brilliant. Wonderful creativity, thinks of things we never would normally, and then crafts stories that at least double the outcomes that are generated on campaigns that we've worked together. And he's also an absolute delight to work with. So if you get the opportunity in the future, grab it and do speak to James and take the opportunity. I think what he's bringing to the market and the sector is very, very important. But without blowing too much smoke, I think we should maybe hand over to James to take us over for this event. So James, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, JP. I don't really know what to say after that, but thank you. Yeah, and of course we're joined, by two other, massive public sector, comms stalwarts as well in terms of what can bring as well in terms of their insight and their audience work and the channels that they help us use, and Darren as well, who I'm sure a lot of you will know. And so between us today, as JP said, that's exactly what we want to try and help you piece together. We want to help you when in those moments when you're bought something that's very imperfect, whether that's a brief, whether that's a time frame, whether that's the level of resources, budget, whatever it is, when you're given a campaign or given a project that seems a tough nut to crack because you just haven't got what you need. How do you work through that? What are some of those simple, actionable and easy to pick up things that we can work through to sort of help ourselves achieve the results that we really want to achieve? Because that's the sort of people we are. We're comms people and we want to do things right and we want to be successful. So yeah, just quickly, JP's given a very nice introduction there. My background is public sector communications, and I've worked for 10 years, across public sector communications, first in-house, and then working, either through a creative agency or as a consultancy. And Turn the Page is very much focused on building campaigns, igniting communications and brands, using the power of stories to tell, to help launch those campaigns and comms, and really bring that connection between communications and creativity together to help create results and help create things that people are interested in. I'm just going to hand over to Darren, let him quickly introduce himself as well.
Thanks, James, and hi everybody. Happy Tuesday. So my background really quick, 28 years and counting in communications now. So I started off in the private sector and found myself in the public sector, which I absolutely loved. 13 years ago, I set up Comms 2.0, and 10 years ago, I set up my own comms consultancy, Creative Communicators. So yeah, and that's a very, very, very busy slide, isn't it? They say don't put too much on a slide, don't they? Well, I've broken that, so sorry. But Alive created that, so blame Alive.
It's busy because you're busy, Darren. I think that's what it is. I think that's what it proves. So hopefully between us today, hopefully with Darren's experience, Can's knowledge, and a bit of mine thrown in, we can help you navigate these imperfect campaign conditions. And I guess this is why. This is an example of kind of why we're here today. As I say, I've kind of worked for sort of the last decade or so, working on a ton of campaigns, from recycling to recruitment to reducing fires. And I think on both sides of the fence, whether that's in-house, or whether that's working, with public sector agencies, as from an outside perspective. I think I could probably count the number of times that the campaigns were created in optimal conditions on one hand, probably on one finger, to be fair. As I said, either timeframes are ridiculous, expectations far exceeding budgets or resources, or the brief's got more holes than Swiss cheese. I think one brief I remember getting while I was working in-house in public sector comms was to create a feeling. And where do you go with that? Where do you start with a brief like that? And it means we're constantly trying to balance this impossible equation. We're trying to somehow fill those gaps, overcome those hurdles, work out objectives, somehow make up the message, guess the audience or the audience insight. And of course, everyone wants it to be creative. So it needs to be creative and eye-catching and interesting. So not much to ask, really, is it? Given that we're dealing with probably imperfect conditions, and I think a lot of the time it feels a bit like comms countdown. We might get given one of the letters. If we're lucky, we might get a few of the letters, but we might get none at all. But regardless of what combination of letters we get given, we still have to ultimately try and make sense of what we're given and try and come up with an answer, and hopefully maybe not an answer quite as rude as that one. So we're playing countdown, we're playing comms or campaign countdown, trying to make the best of what we've got and what we're presented with. So in these less than ideal circumstances, where do we start? So over the next half an hour or so, that's what we're going to do. We're going to share hopefully some very simple, repeatable techniques, I guess cheat codes and shortcuts almost, that can get us started. They can help us crack that system and master that equation. Quick ways to set some solid objectives, find out about our audiences, build messages, and hopefully come up with some creative ideas as well, that are creative hooks for our campaign, and all things that you can get going with in double quick time as well, things that you can put into action straight away. And then at the end of the webinar, we're going to share with you some links to some downloadable templates and resources that mean you can just go straight away from this webinar and start creating your own plans and campaigns. So that's very much the plan for today. So we're going to start off with setting objectives, and I'm going to hand over Darren to run us through this bit.
Thank you, James. So yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Obviously, it's one of the basic building blocks for any good, robust comms campaign or comms plan or comms strategy. One of the things we're asked to do a lot, isn't it? When we say to people, what do you want to achieve from this piece of work? 9 times out of 10, you'll hear the word awareness, won't you? And this is a really, I quite like this one. Please stop raising awareness. There's too much of it. I have become too aware. And I think, yeah, I think we have, haven't we? And we know that since COVID, our attention spans have fallen. We're all clicking and scrolling 10 to the dozen. I saw a stat at a recent Cannes seminar where Generation Z, or Gen Z, as it's often referred to, their attention span is a maximum of 1.7 seconds for any piece of content that they see when scrolling. So we've got, a maximum of about 1.7 seconds to get Generation Z interested in our content. So all of this stuff feeds into our objectives. And one of the things I get asked to do quite a bit is, could you come and run some training on evaluation? So yeah, absolutely. But actually, the more important bit is the objective setting at the start, because if we get the objectives right at the start, the evaluation's fairly straightforward, isn't it? And it sounds easy, doesn't it, setting objectives, but often we're in the hands of other people and we're often trying to delve into getting information from them. What do they really want? It has to be more than awareness. So yeah, any kind of plan or campaign would have some kind of structure or template similar to this. There's lots out there. You choose the one that's your favorite. This is the one that I always go to. I've used this since uni, kind of 28 years ago. Fiddled with it a bit, but actually it still works. And I think the context setting and the aims, getting those right with our internal services, with our clients, whoever they may be, at the start is really important. And that for me is joint work. We can't do that on our own. That's not just for comms to do that. That's working with our colleagues and partners. And then once we've got the context and the aims set, then we can really dive into the objectives. And as I say, if we get the objectives right early on, we stand so much more of a higher chance of success with the campaign or the plan. So for me, we've talked about SMART objectives for years and years and years. You all know what they are, but just a quick reminder, SMART objectives should be specific, they should be measurable, they have to be achievable. Sometimes we see objectives set which we know hand on heart we can't deliver. Either we haven't got the budget, it's just not practical, whatever, or sometimes we just haven't got enough information. Sometimes we are experimenting, we're innovating, we're trying new things. So they have to be realistic, and they also have to be timely. How often as comms people have been told, oh, could you get this done for tomorrow or for next week? Well, probably not. And actually we should back those requests, shouldn't we, wherever possible, because you just won't get great work delivered that way. As with any good objective, they should be informed by good, strong data. And as we're awash with data, aren't we? Whether it's data from email analytics, opening rates, click rates, etc., where it's from social media, whether it's from advertising. There's so much data out there, but there's also a lot of internal data, and this is what I mean. Sometimes we have to unlock the data internally. That because colleagues and teams internally might not realize they even sit on the data, or sometimes being a bit cheeky, they've been a bit lazy and they've just not shared it. So I think that very early stages of any campaign planning or comms planning process, we need to get that really strong data from our colleagues. Love this slide. Many of you will have seen it before. It's the Golden Circles by Simon Sinek. There's if you haven't seen it, definitely watch. There's a kind of 5-minute YouTube video which is in the link in the slides here. Do watch it. And he talked about the why, always starting with the why. And if we nail the why in the objectives, then we can work through the comms planning process to the hows and the whats, etc., etc. But the why is really important. Very often, if you look at any website, probably true of my own as well, so I'm a hypocrite. If you look at websites, we always talk about the what, but really we should be talking about the why, because the why is the bit that hooks us in. The why is the bit we get passionate, enthusiastic about. And if we can nail the why, that's really, really important. I noticed Jill Spurs on the call today from Affinity to Trust. Jill launched a brand new website a few months back now, and that really did nail the why the organisation does what it does. And it's really important. So for me, part of the objective setting is really understanding the why. So when we get those really vague kind of briefs from people to say, oh, can you create a feeling? Well, why would we do that, and what would that feeling look like and feel like? So yeah, why is really, really important. Once we've asked the why, we can keep on asking the why in a kind of really annoying young child repetitive way. So this example here is about fostering. So you've been asked to create a fostering campaign for your organization. Why would we do it? So there's the classic: raise awareness of fostering. But that's the start point, it's not the end point. So why would we do that? It's to make people consider fostering. Okay, why would we still do that? To raise the number of children fostered so that there's better outcomes for children, and there's better outcomes actually for the organisations that spend considerable money looking after cared for children. So working that all the way through, we get good homes for children. Because why? Because every child deserves a loving home and a loving family. So there's a really nice little simple example there of why we need to keep saying why. Thanks, James. So objectives. I mean, you've all created objectives. You've all written comms plans or campaign plans, and you'll have written those objectives at the start. These are examples of SMART objectives that I've seen. So I am involved in something called the Unawards, which we'll talk about later. And in there, when we see the award entries, we're always laser focused on the objectives, because the award winning work always has really, really strong objectives that are all of those SMART things that we said. So here's some examples here. One of my favorites is just a really simple: to increase or to decrease from X to Y by Z date. That's all really simple, but really measurable. Now, it does mean that you need the data for X at the start, and very often that's the bit of information that's missing internally. So we have to strive to get that. Otherwise, we're working in the dark, and that just won't help. Others could be about signing up to events or new services to increase email subscribers. Lots of it will be around engagement online. So typically we've been asked over the years to increase engagement on social media. Actually, that's become really difficult with organic. So there's other channels we need to help us do that as well. And lots of it will be around satisfaction level. So how satisfied are your customers with your organization and your services? And can we put in some benchmark figures? Can we put in some metrics at the start to measure that, to see hopefully that is improving year on year? So just a few quick examples there of what a smart objective might look like. Back to you, James.
Cool, thank you. Cheers, Darren. And yeah, I mean, as Darren says, it's so important to get that first bit right, so that the last bit, at the end, the evaluation becomes a lot easier and shows, hopefully what we've achieved. Just going back to the 5 whys quickly, it's such a powerful and quick tool to sort of do some very, some relatively sort of fast drilling into what those objectives might be, and then ultimately that why as well. And we'll talk about how that why comes in even more useful sort of further down the line, as well as we sort of drill into messaging and things like that. It was actually developed by Toyota, I think, in the 1970s as a problem-solving diagnostic, and it's so great at just doing exactly that, just taking us sort of down through the chain to try and sort of find, what that sort of heart of our campaign is. So a really useful one just to try out. As I say, it's all about these sort of quick tools and techniques that we can use, to start building our campaigns in these imperfect conditions. But what I'm going to do now, I'll let JP take over the screen, and he'll just run you through some thoughts around how we can gain some insights that might also inform our evaluation as well.
Absolutely. So really, going on from what Darren was just recommending there, these hopefully are some practical things you can do to build the framework around a successful campaign. And I want you to think about the situation where you're asked, invited to a meeting, or bump into someone and say, could we have a talk about this? Now, before that meeting, these are things that you can probably achieve in about an hour that really will start to flesh out some of those things that Darren was pointing to, the X's, the Y's, the A's, the B's, and so on. And we're going to want to enable, in order to be able to recommend solutions to people, we're going to need to know audience sizes. We might want to look at speaking to the business intelligence team. We can look at what the audiences are doing online in terms of search and social, and we can dig into what other people have done in this field as well. So sometimes the budget comes to you. It's well worth having an idea of what to recommend in terms of a budget, and knowing the audience size is really, really important. If this is a tiny group of people, you might be able to just engage them in person. If it's everyone 18 plus in an area, you need to know and recommend accordingly the appropriate amount of investment, or else the objectives won't be able to be achieved. And so ONS is brilliant. Age by single year, there's a wonderful file that you have. You can get every single location and every age, and then you can quickly highlight how many people are in that demographic and give yourself some numbers to start modeling with. That's incredibly useful. Also, platforms like Meta, like Google and so on will tell you how many people of a certain target audience there are in your geography. Your business intelligence team, this is probably the one to spend the most time on, and having a 10-minute conversation with someone in the business intelligence team or in the service team to explain the outputs, the why, as we were pointing to, why what we're doing is important, but also why we need them to be involved. And we need them to be involved now, and we will also involve them throughout in terms of evaluation. We'll let them see what's going on, and they'll see the impact of their work. I think that's very, very important to get them on your team, as it were, and then digging out the information that you require and sustaining the feed of that information throughout the campaign. So very much similar as Darren was saying, that there's the volumes that we want to achieve, but also I think in terms of being able to communicate your value, the total cost of why last year, this behavior, this thing not being done, or this inefficient thing being done, and understanding as well the team's capacity for being able to accept incoming inquiries or sign-ups or anything like that, And then what will the impact of that outcome be? Because that will, again, with the audience size, help you probably justify greater investment and couch the importance of what you're doing. And I always find the question, what happens if we do nothing? What happens? That gets a lot of these questions answered for you. In terms of looking at what your local populations are searching for, search is a brilliant way of looking at a specific geography and then seeing what people are typing in onto search. So here's one for flu, which is probably a result of your own communications, pushing people to do certain things. Here's one about vaccine side effects and how that's trending. It gives you a really strong context of the way we use search as a kind of second brain, what people are thinking about, and critically what they're not thinking about. There's a lot of technical terminology that services might use that isn't there. So a really quick bit of search insight, and can give this to you for free, can be incredibly powerful. Also, another thing about what are our audiences seeing online? And this is where a tool like Orlo's Insight tool can be incredibly powerful. So looking around certain themes, certain channels, certain keywords, and setting up terms in order to measure sentiment and to see at your regional level who's influencing you. And this can be really useful for setting up trust barometers, which I think are a real reality check for services. Actually, when we're talking about waste and recycling, this graph is never going to be red. It might be a million shades of pink, but what we want to be able to do is see if we can move this measure over the course of the campaign. So we can see where we are, we can see who's influential, we can see what they're saying, we can pick up terminology, we can see what's on people's minds, which for storytelling is going to be absolute gold to give to someone like James. And then also in the public sector, you have this superpower of being able to share. People who think they've done good work enter the unawards, and the unawards then share all of the entries where people have given consent on comms files. So using comms files, but it's a bit like ChatGPT. You don't just want to look for exactly the same thing as you. You might want to look for campaigns that targeted the same audiences, but we're talking about something totally different. There are lots and lots of intersections between campaigns. So comms files might be the richest source of previous campaign data out there. Use it and have a look, so that before that meeting you can turn up with, this is what people are thinking and saying and doing. This is where you need to move. These are the needles we're going to be moving, and this is what other people have done that's worked. And going back to those things, that needles that we're going to be moving, we'll want to see trust, interaction data, but in terms of value to you, service data is going to be absolutely key. And there can be challenges there. I would suggest, for example, that many, if not most, campaigns don't map interactions with outcomes and service data. Interaction data is sometimes easy to get, but it's what does it mean? Has it translated into service data? And macro data about channels and platforms and things like that, very, very easy to get, but it doesn't necessarily demonstrate your value. And one of the main challenges around this is around user experience. So when we're building the user experience, we need to think like an architect. We need to think at that early point, here are our parameters, here's where we want people to be. Is the route and the channel from them to get to where they are now to where we want them to be easy to do? And can we focus on sorting that bit out first? Many campaigns come a cropper of lots of activity, but a horrible bottleneck at some point of the user experience that unfortunately renders the whole activity unmeasurable, or you don't get the outcome you want. And that's where short UX, so building very, very short landing pages, data collection points that you control, that have all the measurement elements involved in them, are a real top tip. And I'll just show you an example one. This is a live campaign at the moment for Surrey Workwise, getting people with long-term mental and physical health conditions into work, and it just collects a bit of short fill short form fill data, which can then be handed straight over to the service. And the wonderful thing about this is, because we control it, or the people, the council controls it, we can then feed back campaign interactions versus form submissions. And believe me, when you're putting this back to the teams that have commissioned you to do this, it takes a lot of pressure and a lot of tension out of the situation. So this is quite simple live evaluation that enables you to demonstrate your value to your stakeholders really, really quickly. So those are some of the points, some hopefully simple things that you can do there, and what it might end up looking like. But thinking at the beginning and spending an hour or two on this sort of stuff will really mean that the outcomes achieved and the impact of the campaign and your internal reputation are as good as they can be. James.
Sorry,
you might be on mute.
Hello, we're back. I'll just flick this back up again. So hopefully we can all see this okay. Yeah, thanks, JP. I think a sort of useful reflection from me, actually, just from recent experience, is about the use of AI as well in analysing some of that data and analysing, kind of where we might, get Excel documents or things like that from. I was just sort of analysing some staff survey data actually on a project just earlier this week, and it was just interesting to put some of that into AI. See what it came back with in terms of analysing comments, summarising all of those things, but then actually doing that cross-checking and that cross-referencing with your own eyes, and just seeing kind of what the comparison is. And I think it's all those usual AI caveats apply, which is that it's a great starting point, but don't always put your 100% trust in it. There is always things to go back and look over, and nuances, really. It's kind of those sort of subtle nuances maybe that AI can't pick up, and some of those sort of specifics as well. Maybe like if there's a specific in your brief that AI might not be so so clued up on and so aware of, it's absolutely 100% worth still going back over things. It's a great tool to help us accelerate things, but always just sort of checking and double checking that that you've kind of got everything you need from it, because it's not always there. So thanks, JP. So we've now got some insights. Hopefully we're sort of working through, we're sort of starting to understand our audiences, and now it's about, right, how can we build the message? How can we start pinning down the message for our campaign in these sort of time pressed, resource low circumstances? And if you've not really been given much of a brief, or not been given a huge amount of information about your project or the campaign, trying to pin down a message can be like trying to nail down jelly. Where do you start? What are you going to use? And a really sort of simple starting point is using the know, feel, do model. And what we can do is we can kind of use this. We can sort of link back to our golden circle, our thoughts around the golden circle. And it just gives us a starting point. It says, right, well, okay, well, what are the things we need to do with our messaging? What do people need to know, right? What are those key things that we need people to know about our campaign, what we're asking them to do? That links back to the what, that outer circle of the golden circle. What do we need people to know? As Darren says, that's so often what we focus on. We focus on the what, but it is important. Where do we need people to go? What times are things going to happen? What are the benefits of what we're asking them to do? It's that education piece. What do we want them to know? The feeling part is also really important. And again, that's where we come back to the golden circle. The why, that really emotional sort of pull for our campaign. What is the why? What's the feeling we're trying to give across in our campaign? We want people to be empathetic. Are we trying to energize them? Are we trying to inspire them? That is the bit that's going to really sort of hook people into our campaign. If we can make people feel something, they're going to be far more receptive to our campaign, to our call to actions. So understanding what that feeling is that we're trying to project. And then the do, is that, well, I say it's simple, but of course, if you're not being given information, not being given help, but it's focusing our minds on what is that one single thing we want people to do as a result of our campaign. What is that call to action? And do we want them to click on a link, give us an email address? you know, attend an event, whatever it is. What is that one single thing we want people to do as a result of our campaign? So when you're starting out and thinking, right, well, where am I going to start with my messaging? This is just quite a simple way of starting out and thinking about what you need from those messages. And the more eagle-eyed amongst you will have spotted that although we referred back to the golden circle there and talked about the what and the why, we didn't necessarily mention the how. Well, the how is where we kind of bring in our behavioural change thoughts, because the behavioural change techniques that hopefully we can inject into our campaign, that is our how. How are we going to move people from the what to the why, and what are some of those techniques we're going to use? And the East model, I mean, we talk about sort of cheat codes and shortcuts, and that massively kind of, I guess, that massively sort of, yes, maybe undermines what the East model is. But there is no more effective model, I don't think, in terms of campaign planning. If you can hit off the 4 things as part of the East model, making it easy for people, making it attractive, making it social, and making it timely, then it's going to go a heck of a long way to making your campaign a success. And some of you, I'm sure, will be aware of this model. I'm sure a lot of you use it and embed it in your campaigns as well. It really is your best friend in terms of some of those things that you want to do. And again, it's things that we can think about quickly. It's things that we can kind of do to accelerate our campaigns and make them more effective. Some of those nudge tactics we can think about as things that we've already mentioned. So in terms of making it easy, you know, JP mentioned there about the UX experience, making it really short, you know, make it really easy to fill in the form or just enter an email, pre-populated if possible, you know, just so people have to do even less. Just make it really dead easy for people to register or do whatever it is that we're asking them to do. Making it attractive. Can you personalize? Can you make it feel personal to people? That's also a really attractive proposition for people as part of a campaign. Something called the Barnum effect is when people feel like the campaign is speaking to them, when it's specific to them. It just lifts decision making from people's shoulders. They instantly feel that it's about them. So using lots of words like I and your, things like that make people feel like it's already them who's stepped into that campaign and is doing that thing. You know, using lines like, you know, you're the type of person who cares about the environment, you know, those type of things, personalizing the message. And a feel good factor as well, if it's possible. You know, if people feel good about something, if people make, you know, if it makes them feel like they've done something good or good about themselves or good for society, then of course it's going to encourage them to sort of take the call to action as well. Making it social, you know, we are all social creatures, and therefore, you know, if we can do something that we feel is sort of helping the tribe, helping the pack, again, it's something that we're all going to engage with a bit more. Social norms are great. You know, if there's any data that you've got, you know, that can say, you know, 9 out of 10 people in your area are recycling, or, you know, 6 out of 10 people have considered, you know, applying for this. Anything that you can do to sort of show that actually, you know, if you do this, then you're sort of joining the pack as well. Social norms are great for doing things like that. And considering the messenger as well. Sometimes actually thinking about who the messenger is for the message is really important. You know, we see all these trust indexes, we see trust barometers with, you know, doctors and medical professionals at the top and people like that. Really powerful messengers who the public, you know, trust, and probably more so than a politician or a leader, a CEO, unfortunately. And so thinking about that power of the messenger is really important as well in terms of that social aspect. And then making the message timely. And again, you know, we've sort of touched on it. I think JP touched on it then in terms of when we deliver those messages, how we can deliver them at the right time, when trying to catch people when they are most susceptible to seeing our campaign, to hearing our message. You know, if they're job hunting online and we're running a recruitment campaign, catching them when they're actually searching for jobs online, you know, and maybe more susceptible to the message. And focusing on the short term as well. Again, you know, as human beings, we find it really hard to sort of get our heads around like the longer term goal or the bigger picture. We're very focused on short term wins, short term benefits, small wins, really. You know, it's called a conservatism bias, and people don't like stepping out of their comfort zone. You know, so if we can ask our audiences to do sort of smaller things, smaller changes, focus on the short term, that's also likely to be more effective as well. So just there's some simple things there. There's lots of others as well, but that EAST model is really, really crucial in helping us deliver the campaigns and the success and the results that we really want to. And just sort of bringing in a bit of storytelling around the campaign and the message as well. It's really, really useful for us to sort of understand our sort of full campaign story, what it is that where we're trying to get from and where we're trying to get to. And Darren sort of laid a lot of that out at the start when we sort of about setting our objectives, and then of course, you know, what we measure at the end. But putting a story around that's really helpful as well, in terms of it helps to guide, you know, it helps to guide the campaign. It gives us a framework to work with, you know, setting out that challenge at the start. And this can feed into our messaging as well. You know, it helps us to set a context for people, setting out the challenge. What is it that we are trying to achieve? What's that goal we're trying to achieve? What is the journey we then want people to go on? What are we asking them to do? You know, what are those hurdles they need to jump, or actions we're asking them to take? Where does that then lead us? What's the destination at the end of that? What is, you know, where have we reached? Have we reached our goal? Have we met our objectives, that destination? But then sort of beyond that as well, what is the prize for doing that? What is that bigger world impact? You know, if we've achieved X, if we've achieved so many people to sign up for this, or we've increased recycling rates by a certain amount, actually, what is the bigger world picture, and what is the bigger impact of that in terms of, you know, on the environment or on your organization, reputation, all of those bigger pieces as well. So laying out, you know, using a sort of simple story grid such as this helps us to lay out our campaign story. It acts as a bit of a framework for us to kind of work through. It helps our messaging, and it also helps in terms of going on to the evaluation that Darren laid out at the start as well. It helps to provide us with a bit of a guiding hand when we think about moving people from, you know, laying out the context, taking them on that journey, getting them to that destination. Well, that's guiding those outputs for our campaign. It's making us think about the outcomes for our campaign and those bigger world impacts as well. And the evaluation, you know, that sits underneath all of that. Our data, yes, absolutely. You know, the data, the measurement of our campaign, has it been successful? But also, stories is a really important part of evaluation as well. Our more qualitative part of the evaluation. You know, what are the stories that are showing our campaign coming to life, hopefully succeeding as well. So understanding that campaign story also helps us to kind of piece everything together from our objectives through to our evaluation as well. So we've got hopefully a lot of these pieces in place now. You know, some of these techniques you're able to kind of rattle through, and hopefully, you know, you're sort of starting to get your campaign in place now with your messaging, your audience, your objectives. But everyone wants it to be creative, don't they? They want a campaign that they can show off to everyone. It's catching everyone's eye. So how can we come up with a creative hook quickly? And what are some sort of simple, quick, creative techniques that we can use to try and give ourselves, you know, a campaign that's sort of singing and people are recognizing and are engaging with? And we need to be quick at turning on the tap for our ideas, getting as many ideas out there as soon as we can, because it's only by getting lots of ideas out that we're going to end up pinning down the one that really is going to power our campaign. And getting bad ideas out, I mean, they say there's no such thing as a bad idea, but just getting ideas out of our head is a really, really important part of the process for getting to the good ideas, to the gold at the bottom. Because it's only by doing that, only by sort of getting those ideas out of our head, that actually you sort of get down deeper and hopefully land on the good ones and the ones that are going to power your campaign. So a few sort of quick techniques here for doing that. One is to set yourself a deadline. Almost conversely, really, it sort of goes against, what you might think, but creativity loves a deadline, right? And if we can just set ourselves a short time frame to pour out any idea that you've got, no matter how ludicrous it sounds, no matter how ridiculous it might sound, 5 minutes if you're in a team or just as an individual, just to put down any idea that you can think of that could power your campaign. It's amazing what could come out in 5 minutes or 10 minutes if you've got 10 minutes. If you pour out all possible ideas and then you stop the clock after 5, 10 minutes, whatever it is, and then that's the chance for you to then actually refine and review what you've got. And it is amazing how much this process will find some gold for you. As I say, it's about that process of getting potentially those badder ideas out, but actually that then gets you to the gold. So setting yourself a deadline, not being restrictive in your thinking to start with, allowing that sort of divergent thinking initially, getting all those ideas out, but then refining them afterwards, allowing you to sort of hone in, you know, on what will hopefully be a creative hook for your campaign. And it's amazing, you know, we've run this exercise with numerous teams, and it's amazing, you know, how often once they've got all those ideas down, they sort of land on something. They go, well, actually, yeah, that's great, and that's something we can really use. So set yourself a deadline, yeah, and pour out ideas and then refine them afterwards. Thinking about maybe a strapline for your campaign, you know, another sort of quick technique for getting lots of ideas out for a strapline for a campaign. First of all, say it straight. Get down a list of things that you know about the subject matter that your campaign is about. That could be insights, it could be facts, truths, benefits, just some very sort of simple truths and benefits and facts about your campaign, like some examples there on the screen. You know, we sort of referred to a fostering example earlier. Here's some examples here as well. So say it straight. Get down a list of facts, yeah, that you can sort of say about your campaign, and then apply your creative brains to it. Say it straight, then say it great. Take each of those truths, each of those facts, and then use that as the basis for creating your creative strapline. And if you can say, create a list of 10 facts or truths about a campaign, and then maybe try and come up with 5 different creative straplines, you know, that apply to each of those truths, suddenly you've got 50 different options, 50 different straplines, you know, for a campaign that you can run through and think about, you know, in no time at all. So first of all, say it straight, then have a go at saying it great, and hopefully coming up with a great strapline for your campaign. Turning it upside down is another really sort of quick way of trying to think of a creative hook or a creative way you could position your campaign. JP mentioned it earlier, actually. You know, he sort of talked about that question of what happens if we do nothing. And this is exactly the same question, really, but sort of using it potentially as a creative power as well. What if we took our campaign? What would happen if we did the opposite? You know, what if we did nothing? You know, challenge the status quo, and actually that brings you at the problem. It brings you at your campaign from a totally different angle, from a totally different side, and can generate some really interesting sort of creative ideas and thoughts around a creative hook. That image there is a really good example of that. This was a bench that was put on the harbour side in Copenhagen. It was part of a sort of PR campaign, PR stunt by a Danish TV station around climate change, showing, you know, where that bench, the height that bench will need to be, you know, in decades time, you know, should we do nothing about climate change. It's just a really interesting but simple take, isn't it, on that question of what happens if we do nothing. So can be quite a powerful creative generator, that one, just to sort of use as a prompt for our thinking. And if all else fails, and if some of those techniques haven't worked and you still haven't got an idea, well, there's plenty of inspiration out there that we can work with, and plenty of places we can take inspiration from. And look, if it's good enough for Picasso, right, it's good enough for us. A good artist copies, a great artist steals. There's some fantastic websites out there that, you know, show marketing campaigns, advertising campaigns. We've talked about comms files already. You know, what a resource of public sector campaigns that have already been done. You know, probably a campaign that's either been done in, you know, in the same sort of subject matter area, or as JP said, you know, for a similar audience. So many resources out there that we can take inspiration from, in terms of campaigns that have done similar things, or even not, you know, things that might not necessarily seem like they are aligned to your campaign, but can provide inspiration. And I always love this example of a smoke alarm testing campaign from South Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service, where they took a Nike billboard from Times Square in New York and brought it to a billboard on the side of the M1, I think it was, just outside Sheffield. You know, took inspiration from a certain campaign and translated the message into, you know, into what they needed to say around smoke alarm testing. So take inspiration from what's around, yeah, and use it to power your campaigns. And then just to quickly finish with some thoughts around, you know, if we've got some creative ideas, then also some of those other thoughts around, you know, what the content looks like, some of those tactics. And we've touched on stories already. We've talked about our campaign story, understanding kind of our full campaign story. But how can we get more storytelling in there? How can we get sort of stories into our campaigns as well? Messages that are tied to a story are 22 times more memorable than any other message. You know, that is a massive emotional clout that we can give our messages and give our campaign if we can tie them to stories. So thinking about how we can source any stories that might help highlight our campaigns, comments on social media, or, you know, have our contributors on social media, you know, have they sort of given us stories we can use? Things like customer service records, you know, other service records. Have we got stories that help us to illustrate the impact of our campaign, because they are going to carry a much more emotional clout than just sort of standard messaging. They help us make that emotional connection. The South Western Railway campaign that you can see on the screen, I think, is a really great example of that. You know, using real life examples of the type of abuse that staff have received, you know, railway staff have received, and just bringing that through in a really powerful way. You know, that's a really emotional sort of pull on that visual there. And it can be done in quite a small way. Again, you know, we're not talking about huge time. We're not talking about creating things, you know, that have to take a lot of time. These little micro stories where we can say a lot without saying a lot can really, really be powerful in our campaigns. And then a couple of other things that, you know, sort of also, you know, almost again, sort of shortcuts when we're thinking about how we design our campaigns, how we maybe design any visual materials. Stories are great, yeah, absolutely, and faces, you know, in those stories as well. You know, our brains are absolutely hardwired to look at faces. So when we're scrolling or when we're seeing billboards, you know, we are programmed to react to faces and see faces and take more interest in those. So if we can get human faces into our campaign, it's another little shortcut that we can use to you know, to power our campaigns, get results. So making those stories central, making people central, and keeping it simple as well in terms of you know, what people are looking at. Hick's law, it's called, where the less information we provide, less decision making people have to make. We've made the decision for them. So keeping it really, really simple as well. And then just thinking about amplification as well. You know, again, budget might be short. You know, we might not have a huge advertising budget. So how can we amplify our campaign? How can we further the reach of it? Well, of course, we've got huge connections across our partnerships, across our staff groups, you know, potentially peers as well, and the public. Using all of those networks, using our stakeholders, you know, our internal ones and our external ones, and our partnerships as well. Sharing our campaigns with them, giving them perhaps maybe toolkits, you know, that they can use, and social media posts and other, you know, other assets that that we can provide to help amplify our campaign and help other people amplify our campaign as well. So we've rattled through a real load of stuff there. I think a lot of that stuff, you know, potentially can be done in real quick time, and hopefully can empower you to deliver the campaigns where you might not be given the information or the time or the resources that you need. But of course, you know, you can come and talk to us about any of those things, and we can help to support you with those.
Brilliant, James. Thank you so much. Yeah, and as Alex says, this is a brilliant refresher, and there's always something that, whilst you might think you've seen it all before, there's a few things you think, ah, yes, I didn't do that last time. That could have been really useful. I wanted to ask a question really around stakeholder management and internal communications. To you, Darren, first, around when you're going at speed and you've probably not been brought in as quickly as you should have been, you know, or as early as you should have been. Have you heard or seen examples of how a comms pro can manage that relationship, manage expectations, while still delivering something that delivers impact and is meaningful? What would your tips be in terms of speaking to those individuals to sort of orientate the relationship towards success rather than tension, lots of meetings, and not much at the other end?
It's a great question. Thanks, JP. I think Ideally, in your comms strategy, which you set out at the start of the year with all of the campaigns set against the organisational priorities, there should be in there, in the good ones, there will be a stakeholder management section, and which will highlight some of the known ones, some of the obvious ones. And I think that can be a really good start point, because if we go on the premise that we ideally aim for that kind of 80-20 thing, where 80% of our work for the year ahead is planned and known and agreed and prioritised, there's always the 20% which flows in. So I think the 80 of that we should have nailed, because we should know our stakeholders and we've probably worked with them before. The 20 is where it gets interesting, isn't it? And that's why we might need to be a little bit fleet of foot, as you say. But I think the good practice should be set, and we should know many of our partners and our customers. And so I think really it's about the 20% where we haven't necessarily got that information. It is about I think my top three would be don't start from scratch. Go and have a look at who's done something similar already. I think B would be to do the deep dive data at work, both on your own internal data and, as I say, pushing internal colleagues to help with that. Externally, looking at what data we've got on these stakeholders. And I think thirdly, I think one of the things it's tweaking as we go along. I think sometimes we set these objectives, don't we? And we hope to hit them. But actually sometimes in campaigns things don't go well, and we do have to tweak, and we do need to be a bit flexible. And I think sometimes it's about, if it's a 6-month campaign and 2 months in it's not working well, no point flogging a dead horse. Let's go back and tweak and have a look at, are we not hitting those customers? Have we got the audience data wrong? Is there something new we need to trial? So I think some of it should be tried and tested, and we know. Some of it is honestly, it's about that just innovation and trying new things. And actually sometimes there isn't data to back up trying something, is there? It's gut instinct's almost kind of been vilified, hasn't it, in recent years? Because there's a lot of examples of where it goes wrong. But actually, I think comms people do have good gut instincts when it comes to campaigns. And I think trying something we think might give us a chance of success with a new stakeholder group, sometimes that can be worthwhile as well. And I suppose the final thing, just do some quick A/B testing, whether it's email, whether it's online ads, whether it's social media. If we've got a new stakeholder or audience group that we need to really work with and work well and effectively, let's try some A/B testing and see if that can, pay off and provide any dividends.
Brilliant points, loads there, and I think that getting those bits right at the beginning, and helping stakeholders understand what comms can do and what they can't, and what we can learn together, I find is very, very important. Often as well, saying, this is a plan, this is a statement of intent, but if the campaign goes well, it won't happen like this. We'll be doing more of that and less of this, as it goes on. So yeah, really useful stuff there, Darren. Thank you. And Sophie made a great. She's a non-comms person, and this is really useful for someone who might be briefing the marketing team. James, in your Darren, you've popped your hand up. Do you want to say something quickly?
Oh, sorry, only just quick. Yeah, just again, yeah, I loved Sophie's points. I ran a session for some non-comms people earlier in the year with an organisation in London, and the brief was, can you help the comms team work with non-comms people about what makes up a good campaign and where they can help? And it was fascinating, and we had quite a bit of fun during the session, actually, because I did ask those cheeky questions about, have you ever gone to the comms team a little bit late with your requests? And all the hands kind of slyly crept up, and I think it's a brilliant point, because we can't deliver our best work without working well with our colleagues. So I think having Sophie on the call is brilliant. We need more comms people in our work, don't we? So yeah, that was my only point. Thank you, JP.
Brilliant, absolutely. And going on from that, James, in terms of managing relationships with stakeholders, unfortunately, sometimes a third party is listened to more than the wonderful experience that exists within the organisation. Could you give us some of your top tips for where you might have helped a comms team control expectations, get their energy orientated in the right kind of way?
Yeah, I think that's so true, JP, and it's such a shame that that's the case, because everyone on this call today, and way beyond as well into the comms teams, are so well clued up on a lot of this stuff and have got all of this insight. And so often it comes down to those things we've mentioned all the way through, and time and resource and giving them the space to be able to do that and use their skills and use their knowledge to create great campaigns. And that's hopefully that's what we've helped people to do today, is to kind of navigate some of those restrictions. But yes, hopefully some of those things that we've, some of those quick tools that we've talked about today, and you're absolutely right. It's so interesting with Sophie there being invited onto the call or joining the call as well from a non-comms perspective. The thought that she might take a few of those things, maybe a no feel do, or an East behaviour change model, and then take that back to her comms team and say, right, we need to nail these things, for our campaign to be a success. That feels like the holy grail, doesn't it? That not only the comms team sort of coming and saying that, but someone from, the department or the service as well saying, yes, these are the things we need to know. That feels like a really happy marriage. And hey, if we can, let's face it, if we can help to make that happen, then there's probably only going to be good things on the other side.
Brilliant stuff. Those tools as filters and as focusing tools to help you work out what's, and also to trigger and remind us to think of some things maybe that we wouldn't naturally do. Amy's asked a question. She said, well, is a campaign always the answer? Sometimes the insight stage shows it's an operational that needs fixing and not a new campaign. Brilliant question. James, do you want to take that one?
No, it's not always the answer. Absolutely not. And I think that is where the comms expertise, the comms knowledge really comes into play, Amy, which I'm sure, is kind of exactly what you do in your teams, and I'm sure everyone else does as well. Try to provide, that's, sometimes I think we forget that actually, as comms people, we can provide an insight that maybe other people, don't have, and that we have years of experience and expertise to be able to offer on that front. And you're right, it's not always a campaign, and we should be able to push back and say that actually this is a service issue. It might be sometimes that if it's something you've got the time or the resource to do, that sometimes running a campaign, albeit in a very small, reduced form, can help to show that and say, we ran this campaign and it achieved very little, or, no one really engaged with it. Sometimes there might be a proof point there. It's a bit of a sort of cheeky way of doing it, maybe, but a tactic to have up your sleeve. But no, you're absolutely right, Amy. That's not always the case.
And I think that's why the tools are so useful, to filter that and focusing on the user experience more often than not, particularly in recruitment, the application process. We often say you shouldn't drive traffic to this because it will almost certainly be wasted. There is reputational risk for comms in terms of pushing a lot of traffic to something that isn't going to work, or maybe delivering a stream of inquiries at a pace the service can't handle. And so checking all of those things in the first place might, as you say, yes, yield that if you just tweak that, you're probably all right organically. Maybe you don't need the whole comms campaign around it. And as Darren says, you can't comms your way out of a poor service. And Darren, Holly asked a question. Have you got any advice around showcasing, communicating the value that comms and the time and effort by a comms team, what it takes to create a successful campaign, and how to get that across to non-comms colleagues who won't be. There's the tools, there's the filters, but have you come across anything else?
Yeah, another great question. I think going through the evaluation with colleagues, and I think sometimes also the evaluation of when things haven't gone well. So, do you remember that last time when you asked us to deliver that piece of work? Here's what we did. Here's how much time we spent on it. Here's how much it cost. And that can be calculated. I've got a little model that works quite simply, which is you put in, if you've got a campaign team, and I don't know, you've got a web person, a social person, a PR person, put in their hourly rates, and they'll all be different. Put in their hourly rates, and then times that by the amount of time that was spent on the piece of work. And we should really record that if we can. Agencies do it, and and it can be just really simple. A piece of paper and a post-it and a pen can do it. It doesn't need to be scientific. Calculate how much time was spent, how much the individuals cost, present that back, and was that a good return on investment for the organisation? It all sounds very monetary, doesn't it? But I think sometimes that's what people understand, particularly politicians. If you've got local councils or government departments. Politicians get the financial side of things very well. So I think focusing on how much time we spent on something and the cost of it for something that didn't work actually can be just as beneficial as something that went swimmingly well. So I think always having those evaluation reports, presenting that back, sharing those with the world. I always used to bore people silly when I was in house with, oh, here's our monthly report, here's what we've done for you. And I think we have to shout about that, don't we? And make sure that people see it, make it very visual, make it short, no more than 2 pages, turn it into an infographic if you can. And I think all of that data and information and presenting it back and making people really clear about, we know a huge amount of time and effort goes into this work, but we need to keep telling our our internal teams and our colleagues about that. So I don't know if that answers the question in any way.
It's great. It's something that I think, like a cleaner's house, we're great at communicating for other people, but comms needs to be part of the job. And some of the best leaders that we see, comms leaders we see out there, I think of Andreas at Tower Hamlets particularly standing out, and many others spend a lot of their time doing comms upwards to make sure their teams have space to go out and be creative and do all those kinds of things. Thank you so much for all of those questions and all of those comments. James, I believe there's a couple of shameless plugs that we have just to stick on to the end of resources. Sorry, much better.
Yeah, I'll let Darren take these.
Yeah, thanks both. Just really quick then. So there's some downloadable resources here that you might like. This is a kind of infographic guide that James and I put together with Alive with Ideas. So you can get this as a free download on the Alive with Ideas website or the Comms 2.0 website. And they're meant to be creative and to spark ideas. So it's the kind of thing you could sit in a team meeting for an hour and kind of work through step by step, and then somebody in the campaign teams could take it away and finesse it. So it's a really nice, simple, we think it's nice, a really simple kind of campaign plan on a page, interactive, fun little resource that's, as I say, a free download on both websites. Other things to have a look at. Awards, which I've mentioned to everybody in the world over the past week. They launched last week. It's the 9th annual Awards, which have just launched. I think certainly they're the most accessible awards out there. They're free to enter. They're really simple to enter. Thanks to John Paul and the team at Cannes. There's a really lovely, simple online entry form, and you can enter as many categories as you want through just one entry form. So again, it's free to enter. There's 21 categories, so there's something for everyone. They're open until the 30th of October. And of course, what happens is everybody enters in the last 48 hours, but they are open now. So entries have already begun landing, which is great to see. One word of warning, the deadline is never extended. So they do close on the 30th of October. And there's a fantastic ceremony. It's a very cool cinema in Birmingham on the 6th of December, which is always a sellout. So do have a look, because you all do, everyone on this call does brilliant work, but if we don't tell people, they won't know about it. And I'm yet to meet a chief exec who doesn't love an award plonked on their desk. So do please get entering the awards, and the address is there for more info.
Brilliant stuff. Yeah. And you can start your award entry now. You can get ahead. You don't have to create the high tension situation towards the deadline. So yeah, it really does. It works as an injection of positivity, as we saw with the Foster Care Collaboration Award, into the organisations, and is one of those other tools that helps you demonstrate your worth internally. Thank you everyone for attending today. Apologies for going a bit over, but that was information dense, and I think also considering that when work really does get impossible and you're being asked way too much, people like James, people like Darren are there to help, and they can have a conversation with you now. Drop them an email. I'm sure they're happy to talk and give advice, even if it doesn't result in work. But they're definitely here for the community and here to support you. So note that email down, have it in your address book, and please do drop them a line if you need any support in your role. I think that's it for now, unless anyone's got anything to add. Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. and look forward to seeing you again soon.